Welcome to the Meet the Author Book Club with Authors Alcove. Today, I am so excited to have Melanie Murphy with us. She is the author of The Extraordinary Anna Parke. It's a women's fiction with just a touch of magic. I guess it's called magic realism, I believe. I think Rebecca can tell me for sure. Would you say that's the category?
That sounds accurate to me.
Okay. So I actually read the book initially several months ago and just fell in love with it. I thought it was such a good storyline. In fact, from my very first conversation with her, I actually had already said, if I do meet the author book club, I was going to ask her because I was already in love with it. So she said yes. So I'm very excited. She is our second ever Meet the Author.
Yay.
So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And since this is a book club, there will be spoilers, and there's going to be spoilers on this one. If you want to hear my interview with Melanie that does not have spoilers, you can go back into the Writing Place with Authors Alcove podcast history, and it will also be in the show notes. Anyway, so I would like to get us started, but I'd like to I'd like to introduce our hosts first. So welcome to my host. We're going to start with Dawn Marie, and I would like you to just share a little bit about yourself. You can give any plugs if you have a website or if you have a business of any sort or books, hint, hint, and just give me what your favorite, or excuse me, the first book that you read that you remember where you were like, I love reading.
Okay, so my name is Dawn Marie Manning. I am an author, speaker, and businesswoman. And I am in the process of finishing up my first book. So I'm excited about that. It's a collection of short stories, all with the aim to heal, that can be used as a tool for therapists and family members to be able to talk about someone's pain, because sometimes pain is very difficult to put into words. So I'm the pain whisperer. That's what I do.
Mhm.
So I'm also starting about podcast myself. All things interesting, all things, if you have a story where someone's overcome something, or if it's just interesting to listen to, or something that someone might use to find healing, we're going to have lots of guests on that podcast. So that's going to be a lot of fun. The first book I remember really enjoying actually was so much younger than my ability to read, because my mother read Little Women to us at bed time every night on her big king size bed. All of us would go in there and sit down and listen to Little Women, and got all the way through it. And then the next one she did was Little Men. So I had fallen in love with books long before I could actually read. Now I read Louisa May Alcott and think, oh, she's a little judgy. She's kind of she's kind of preachy. But at the time when I was a child, it was just, Beth was my favorite, and it opened up a world of life to me, and a lifelong love of books. And
Wonderful.
I'm so happy to meet you, Melanie. I'm really excited that you're here today. I really loved Anna Parke.
You did?
I
Thank
did.
you. I am so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all day. All month, really.
And
Us too.
next, I say this every single time, but the next one is going to be Amber Letters, and she is our voracious reader. And I personally think that her opinions are the ones that I am most looking for, because she is the one that is reading it just because she loves to read. So, can you introduce yourself and just tell us also your favorite book, or your first favorite book, I guess?
Absolutely. So hi, I'm Amber Letters. I'm a development manager for the ALS Association, and I was a teacher for 16 years. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm so excited to be with such talented, educated women. And I just love hearing their point of view when it comes to the different books that we're reading, the different genres. It's just so wonderful to hear from a different perspective and a different lens. I am part of a book club. This tells you anything about what I like to watch. We were called the Real Readers of Pittsburgh. So like housewives. But our conversations were a little bit like that as well. So I just love being a part of this and just hearing what everybody has to say from either an author, an editor, from their standpoints. So I would have to say, it's a little cliche, but it's true. I had to do a summer reading the summer before 10th grade, and it was To Kill a Mockingbird. And I remember being on vacation with my family, I didn't want to go to the beach. I even like looked forward to like my alone time in the bathroom because I just wanted to pick up this book. I didn't want anyone to talk to me. And maybe my mind wasn't developed enough to really grasp it. But then I was so fortunate later in life that I was able to teach it to my ninth grade honors class. So I've been able to relive it. And I did really enjoy even Truman Capote's book, and to see that, he dedicated one to Harper Lee. And then I did read the sequel as well. And I had my thoughts on it, but it's just, I will always say that book because, again, it keeps living, with the new literature coming out, with all the connections. And that was it. That was the book for me. And I'm so excited to meet you. I am in a room of talented writers, but I feel like I'm like meeting a movie star whenever I meet the author of a published book that I can touch and smell. And I'm a book smeller. So thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Melanie's actually a school teacher as well. So
Yes.
Okay, and I purposely did not say Rebecca first because I just finished her book, the first in her series, A Heart of Flame, and I have to say I loved the magic system, and she has something with auras that like really resonated with me. So if you have not read A Heart of Flame by Rebecca Maeve Hartwell, you should. And anyway, so Rebecca, do you mind just introducing a little bit about yourself, and also the same question for you?
It would be my pleasure, and thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, my name is Rebecca. I am the developmental editor behind Heartbound Editing. That is what I do full time. I love it so much, just taking stories apart and helping the author to put them back together in an even better way. As you mentioned, I am also an indie author myself. I have 4 books out, well, 3 full-length and a novella. And I'm so delighted to have the chance to talk to another indie author here today in a similar genre. I can't wait to hear what she has to say and to talk about her works. So I was giving some thought to what my first favorite book was, and I have probably forgotten it a long time ago. Some of my earliest memories are pretending to be asleep during nap time so that my parents would leave me alone and I could sneakily read. So I have probably completely forgotten that my first favorite book even exists. But the 2 oldest that I have on my shelves here are A Search for Delicious and The Legend of Holly Claus, both of which are delightful YA fantasy, so it's not hard to see where my love of the genre comes from.
And I'm Agnes Wolfe, the host of this podcast. And I will say that my first favorite book that I ever read was The Secret Garden. I read it in 3rd grade. And I think it's actually the first like chapter book I actually finished. And I resonated with Mary because I'm a little bit of an outcast loner. All right. So Melanie, thank you so much. And I would love to hear your answer too, but that wasn't one of the questions I was going to ask. So feel free to share that. But can you just share just a little bit about yourself and what inspired this particular book, and just let us know if there is more to come?
Sure.
In this series, if it's going to be a series or standalone.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really so excited to be here and so humbled to be in your company and, to be included. So I am a school teacher. I teach high school English. I've been teaching for 18 years. I also inherited my love for reading from my mom, who was a big reader. Story time before bed was always like my most favorite part of the day. And I've had my nose in a book as long as I can remember. I loved some of the early ones that stick out. I loved the Shel Silverstein poem collections, The Light in the Attic, and I remember just having all of them. And the way they stood on the shelf, I just like loved them, the thickness of them, and the way the book jackets were. And I also loved, like James and the Giant Peach and some of those early books. Just the way the description was just delicious, and it just captured me from a very, very young age. And I love that I get to share my love for reading with my students. And I also have had a lot of experience teaching To Kill a Mockingbird. So that also, very much sticks out in my memory. I love Harper Lee, and I love that story. And I've actually recently been kind of trying to add some more modern literature to my classes, and, just trying to like freshen up some of those classics with pairing them with maybe like maybe an easier to digest book for some of my struggling readers, because I do teach a lot of struggling readers and writers. So that's kind of, my origin. I've just, like I said, I've always loved reading. My prized possession as a child was my library card. And I, so proudly carried it around and went to the library. And even as a young kid, I remember I had an assignment in school where we got to actually write and illustrate our own book, and we could have it in the library and our friends could take it out. And I just, from a very, very early age, I was just always drawn to creating and reading. So a little bit about my story. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to read it and support an indie author. It's not easy. And I, actually some exciting news. I just finished my second book, and I've been picked up by a small publishing house. So that's like really exciting. So my second book is actually going to probably be released this summer with this new publisher. And she eventually does want to re-release this book as well, because my vision is a series. So I'm planning on having 4. Well, for my first ones, I'm planning on writing more than that, but I'm hoping that each one will be a reflection of a different element. So this one is earth, and my next one's going to be water, and then I would have fire and air. So they would all kind of be like a little 4-pack. And they wouldn't be related with plot or character or anything like that, more so just thematically. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited to launch my second book this summer at some point. I'm working, like I said, with this publisher, waiting for cover designs and editors and all that. So I'm, I'm really excited to take the next step. So yeah. So your last question was just about my story, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I live in New York. Where does everybody live?
All right. Dawn Marie, where do you live?
Michigan.
Amber.
Pittsburgh.
Rebecca.
I'm in Maine.
And I'm in Michigan as well.
Oh, wow. So we're everywhere. So I am the lone New Yorker here, and I take a lot of inspiration from New York. I actually just recently visited Maine. My gosh, what a beautiful state. I tried to get Stephen King to meet me for tea. He didn't answer, but that's okay, on Twitter. But so I'm a big fan of New York. I grew up in Long Island on the water, which is where my second story is going to take place, in a little beach town that I live, where my first apartment was. But the story that you ladies all read, Anna Parke, takes place upstate in the Adirondacks, which is a favorite vacation destination for me. Like, ever since I was a kid, my family always took me to Lake George. I'm not even sure if being from out of state, you've heard of that region. The Lake George region was just always like a huge vacation destination for me growing up. I take my own children there. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I went to college upstate. So when I started writing this, I knew if I was going to explore the magic of nature, which is something that's just so near and dear to me, I knew that it was going to take place in those Adirondacks, upstate New York. It's just the place already is magic. So to kind of add that little bit of extra magic just felt really, really natural to me. And in terms of starting to write my book, so like I said, I've been an English teacher now for the past 18 years, maybe 19. I kind of lost track, but a long time. And I teach writing. I teach a senior writing class, and we start every day with writer's notebooks, just to kind of like get the students into writing whatever's on their mind. And I always share my journals with them to kind of model sharing and, think alouds and all of that. I share every time I give them an assignment. I do the assignment as well, and I share and I model it. So one day I was reading something to my students that I had written, and one of my students said, you should write a book. And I was like, you know what, that's going to be my writer's notebook entry today. So I wrote this kind of nugget of an idea down, and I didn't know what it was going to be. And it turned into this. And, I never knew that I was always a bucket list kind of thing, but I never knew that I could do it, that I would have the time to do it. But I just really dedicated myself to myself. And, I know I spent as a mother, I spend so much time with my kids and dedicating my whole life to doing everything for them. So this was kind of like a little pocket that I was able to carve out for myself. And I self-published last summer on Amazon. I did everything myself, all the editing along with a colleague. And I know that it still is it still needs more editing. So when it does get re-released by this current publisher, I'm hoping for a really solid editor to kind of go through it and catch what I missed, because every once in a while I'll open it like, dang, there's that little typo there that I missed. But yeah, I love the story. I relate to the story. I connect to it in so many ways, and I'm really excited to hear what you all think about it.
If you're looking for a nice developmental editor, I know one. Her name is Rebecca, and she might be like,
you know
right
what?
there.
I was just when Rebecca introduced herself, I was like, ooh, I got to write down her name and your story. What is Heart of Flame? What was it?
Yeah, A Heart of
Yes.
Flame.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to take note of that, and I would definitely love to be in touch as, you know, I kind of move on in this whole journey.
So I'm going to bring it back to the hosts, and we're just going to say just one thing that we just really loved about the book. I'm going to start, and then we're going to go with Dawn Marie, then we're going to go to Amber, and then Rebecca. And Rebecca, then I'm going to just let you lead in with the first question after you share something that you liked about it.
Okay.
So the thing that the reason why I picked up that book to read was because of the magical realism part, because I love fantasy, and that kind of tickles at that a little bit. But what I really ended up liking was just the transformation of the main character, Anna. I just really loved her transformation.
I am having a hard time picking just one thing to say that I loved. You deal with trauma really well.
Thank you.
You really deal with trauma and healing really, really well. And I was incredibly impressed with that. And I have questions about it too, just so you know.
Thank you.
I have to agree with Dawn. I've really enjoyed this book. I really I mean, I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to see what was going to happen next. But something that I did make note of was I really liked that we got to know the little minor characters maybe a little bit better than we would in other novels. Everybody, I mean, obviously the doctor was a bigger character, but you know, everybody from, oh, help me out, I'm so sorry. Anybody that she would meet.
Yeah.
Somebody jump in.
Yeah.
The
So,
dermatologist,
the dermatologist and the bartender.
the bowling owner,
Yes,
and yeah.
yes. Thank you so much. I love that it was third person omniscient in those parts. Like, I love that we also knew what they were thinking, and I love that they were part of the story. I apologize that he didn't write down specifically who it was. Like, I feel stupid right now.
No.
But, I just really love that you developed so much more, and we just got enough that we kind of knew that that character was there for part of their journey, but it wasn't prolonged to the point where like, is this going somewhere? So I thought you did a fantastic job with that.
Thank you. I really, that was actually, a lot of those came in my later edits, which I'm like so glad that you enjoyed that, because I tried really hard, because it was really all told from one, you know, like it was mostly through Anna, the whole story, and I was trying to add more depth to it. So I tried to kind of instead of telling it from her perspective, take the chapter, not that it was first person from a different perspective, but to take that narrative shift and really kind of tell what was going on from another standpoint. So that was something that I worked really hard on. I'm really glad that you
I did. And we know as teachers through characterization, characters' thoughts, feelings, what others think about them. So I feel like that really helped us to get to know your character just by knowing the minor character's thoughts. So you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
And I am very much in consensus with what everyone else has said. The biggest compliment that I have for the story is that this is one of the most character first stories I think I've ever read. Like, just that character, not only of Anna, but as Amber was saying, of the psychiatrist and the bowling alley manager, having that just not only the character built, so how they speak, how they act, but who they are internally, always being right at the forefront, was absolutely a very strong theme in every single scene. It was great. And to segue that off into my first question, you just talked about it a little bit in answer to what Amber said, but it's very uncommon for me to see the POV, the actual experience of the story for the reader, having those moments in secondary characters where they aren't necessarily driving the plot, they aren't necessarily the focus or under the spotlight, but you're still getting into what they're stressed about, what they're worried about, what they're hoping for. And I was wondering where that came from in what you were going for with the book.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, I'm like gonna cry with all these comments. I'm so flattered and humbled by your feedback. As I said before, I am like a huge Stephen King junkie. And he does that so unbelievably well in his stories. Like to the point where you know what the gas station attendant is doing when so-and-so walks in. And I like love that about him. Because he really creates like a world, right? Like the kingdom, the Stephen Kingdom. And I just admire that so much in his writing. And I love that. And I know some people would criticize him for being too wordy, which he is very wordy. But I love how he gets into those characters. So he was one of my huge inspirations for that, because that's just something I admire so much in his writing. I think it adds to the feeling of believability. It adds to the feeling like this person is real and these people are real, and they all have, yes, they're all together and we're focused on Anna's story, but they all have their own little motivations. So I was trying to kind of create more of like a world where it's not just Anna, but it's all these other people that interact with her in other ways. And it's almost like there could be a story from the dermatologist's perspective that maybe just hasn't been written yet. And you never know, you know, and a lot of these characters kind of, like I said, developed really organically, and I came to really love them. And I think about like, oh, I wonder what, you know, the dermatologist or the bowling attendant, or the Gina, the bowling attendant's granddaughter with her nails. I wonder what she would think about this. And I wonder, you know, like I almost felt like I tried to make it so each of those characters could have like a story quivering on the horizon that maybe just hasn't been told yet, but could, to kind of add to the feeling that it's like it's a world there.
I love that it says every person you meet has a story you don't know.
Yeah.
I love that about it, that it really, then we start to ask ourselves, okay, so this person that I encounter at the gas station, what's their story really like?
Yeah. And I
Because
do
we
that a
forget
lot.
that.
I very much wonder about
Mhm.
other people and their experiences. And, you know, they have their own experience with me, but they're going to go home behind closed doors and do their own thing that I don't even
Right.
know about. So I love the idea of, you know, these like that they're real people. They don't just exist for Anna. They exist in
Right.
conjunction with her, but then also isolated.
I felt bad for the guy at the first place that Jacob was committed, where he was talking about how his wife that was cheating on him. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to come to some point where like he had freedom from that, you know,
Yeah.
where he could let go of it. I wanted to hear more from him and from your secondary characters like that. Um,
Thank you.
it invests you in people more than just Anna.
Thank you.
And
I've had a lot of people say stuff like, well, I was hoping that you would come back to so and so, but you never did. And I was like, yeah, you know.
I find that very interesting because some, you know, like you'll hear from different people like that is a, you know, some people will say that they don't like that and some people will say they do like that. And it's just so interesting the different ways that people view like knowing the secondary characters so well or not knowing or you know, it's just kind of funny how the different perspectives, I thought.
Yeah, you know, because I don't like when things always tie up so perfectly in a bow. I like when there's that element, you know, like I was actually reading something recently. Have you heard of that literary phrase, Deus ex machina? Like the idea that like when the writer gets him or herself into a corner, something crazy happens, that's almost like unbelievable, and you're like, oh my god, deus ex machina, what a cop out kind of thing. And I always found that concept so like interesting, because like all like, oh, you know, when people say that was just so contrived, it was just too perfect, but it's like, on the other token, it's like it's literature, it's a book, like of course it's contrived, you know, like it doesn't exist in real life. Like I could pick the one character that survives the event to talk about, and that's just because that's the one character that we tell, it doesn't mean that it's contrived. So you know, I'm always in that like push and pull with making things like work out so perfectly, and then leaving it also like open as well, because real life doesn't always tie up in all those bows. So you know, even it's funny was with my next story. I just got a note back from an editor who wished that I had tied something up a little bit more than I had at the end. And she was like, I really wanted to see some closure with this. And she suggested that I changed the ending a little bit. And I thought about it for a while, and I really respected that. I get it. Like, everybody wants the happy ending or to know that the friends get back together. But I don't know. I tend to not feel like I need to do that all the time when I'm thinking about stories. I don't know. So, you know, with those secondary characters, you know, like one of my dear friends with the doctor, you know, Jacob Park's doctor, and her and his, and, you know, she was struggling with the relationship with her boyfriend or whatever, you know, the intimacy was going out the window and the relationship was going down the tubes because she was too invested with work. One of my early readers said, can't you just make them be okay and get back together? I'm like, I just don't think that would really happen, you know? And I love that about her, that, like, I think that's so amazing about that character, that she puts her patients first. Like, that's who she is. She's not going to take a step back because that's just not who she is. I don't know if that makes sense or that sounds weird.
So this is gonna give a huge spoiler, but you know, we talked about how like you are really good at telling about character. And I think just because maybe my relationship with becoming a mom and all of that, well, I was very intrigued with the ending, how she ended up she adopted the girl,
It was
right?
like in the process of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I adopted my oldest. And what type of mother do you think she ended up being? Like, just what do you imagine?
I imagine that she would do everything right that her mother screwed up. You know, I would imagine her being like open with her child, embracing these abilities, having a shared experience, um, being there for more than just the physical and the monetary needs that she had. Because to me, that's not what it's really about. You know, just being present and being open and having dialogue and just being loving, right? Which is something that she lacked. And I think that I think in that way, she was really able to kind of get like absolution, you know, on behalf of her mother, because she didn't go down that same path. I anticipate that she would be a really good mom.
Don Marie, do you have a question?
I do. I wanted to ask about the article that Anna found in the tree, in that silver box,
Mm-hmm.
where that doctor talked about deliberate neglect as being crucial to raising these kids not to be monsters.
Yeah.
And I wondered how much that affected Beverly's treatment of Anna.
Yeah. I left it open for that because I don't know.
Mm. And Anna doesn't either.
And it doesn't either. But
Right.
it's like the idea that it was like planted in her mind that there might have been a purpose for this horrible upbringing.
Right.
It kind of made us think that there was purpose for Beverly's awful treatment of her daughter.
At the same time, Beverly almost treated her like she was a stain on her life.
Yeah.
So it might have been just an excuse to
Right.
treat her as terribly as she was already going to treat her.
Right. And it's, you know, also the idea is you can always find some, you know, crackpot theory that's going to justify our bad behavior. You know, it's what we choose, what path we choose to go down. And I feel that way even with anything, with politics, with whatever. You can always find someone that's going to justify something that you believe in.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and I think we look for that justification to kind of make ourselves feel better sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that Dawn brought that up, because one of the things that I noticed was how you played with leaving some aspects of the story really opaque, like that. And I also noticed one of the areas that was really unique to this story was an extra layer of transparency that I don't see very often, specifically with Anna's simulations of how she wishes that she could answer the injustices that are done to her.
Mm.
And it was just a fascinating device to have that confrontational inner world in that conflict and juxtaposition with her much more passive outward existence. And one of the questions that I had for you was, I was wondering, you just mentioned a little bit about how you don't feel the need to pay everything off, but I was wondering if that particular element had a moment in the climax or in the resolution where you feel like this is the moment where all of that pays off, where she has her glow up moment, her moment of, catalyzing and coming out of the chrysalis and having that moment. The best one that I could find was maybe that conversation with her realtor, where she's
Yeah.
taking her mother's house off the market, but I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah, that was, and I could relate to that personally in my life, things you wish you said, and, times where you could have stuck up for yourself, or you maybe should have stuck up for yourself, and you have that inner monologue, but instead you just kind of play nice. And I think sometimes as women, we do that maybe more so in our society. But for me, it was definitely that moment where she finally realized, like, I am not going to explain my behavior. I'm not going to apologize for what I want anymore. I am going to kind of take ownership of my life instead of being this like passive person who's just kind of like a bystander. So at the end, when she was being pushed to sell that house, and the realtor was being kind of pushy, and instead of just thinking the monologue, she said it. And for her, to me, that was like very symbolic of her transformation, and for her like finally like asserting herself and sticking up for what she wants in her life, and for not being passive anymore, and not being that kind of pushover that she had been in childhood with her mother, right? And she'd grown so much throughout it all. So I wanted at the end for her to be like, no, this is not what I want. I'm going to do this. And I don't care who messes up. I don't care if it messes with these people who have put this offer on my house. Like, it's my house still, it's my life. And I'm not going to kind of be apologetic about it anymore.
And I will say, as somebody who I've been joking with the other people, where it's like, it's time for us to read a book where the main character doesn't have a broken relationship with her mother.
Yeah.
Because
I know, it's such a common trope.
They hit way too close to home. So as somebody who lived a lot, like when you describe Beverly's victory smile, that resonated to my core. And I read this about Anna Parke and went, oh, I had millions of conversations with people in my head as I was growing up, and I was an adult, and I had to really learn to take back my voice. And I think that's almost the most powerful moment in the entire book.
Thank you.
Because every abusive dynamic, whether it is a religious abusive environment, a horrible work environment, an abusive intimate relationship, growing up in an abusive family, every kind of abuse, they silence the abused. And so for her to say, you know what? I'm going to say it out loud. That was, to me, the most indicative moment of her healing of any moment in the whole book.
Thank
I thought it
you.
was great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I have a statement and a question. So every Halloween, I listen to Sissy Spacek narrate Carrie. Have you listened?
I haven't listened, but I teach that book with my my 11th graders. So I know that I need to, but I've read that book so many times. I adore that story.
I do as well. And Sissy Spacek just delivers. I mean,
I got to do it. All right.
October, like a masochist in my car in the dark. But
my kind of good time.
And you know what? And I was putting a couple thoughts together. And then when you even said that you were a Stephen King junkie, because I really did, I thought about Carrie a few times while I was reading this book. I love that story so much. I saw some of the same elements, and I mean that in the most flattering way.
Thank you.
So this question that I'm about to say, number one, shows my ignorance to this genre, because I am very new to this genre, the ladies will tell you. And I promise I don't mean it how I'm about to ask it.
I won't, just ask. I won't take any.
Okay. No, you won't. You
No.
might think, oh my God, this girl's so stupid.
No, I never would.
So like, for example, Stephen King did not make up telekinesis. Whether or not you believe in it, Are there articles out there that, how did you come up with this idea? Was this something that you came up with, or is there real, like when you wrote those articles? And again, I'm almost laughing at myself if this is such a terrible.
No, I think that it's
Did
totally
you
a great.
research this? Is this something that is a real, I don't even know what to call it, like a real talent, a real inherited that people have talked about and have written articles about? So that's my question. And maybe it is even more of a flattering question, because I felt like I was like, oh, I should Google that. Maybe
Yeah.
I should talk to the trees. Do you know
And
what I
I'm
mean? I just
so-
felt like you weaved it in so well. I didn't feel like I was reading something that I wasn't used to, that type of genre.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because I really wanted it to sound like really legit.
Yeah, good
So
job.
no, I mean, I never read anything about it.
Okay.
I did look up, like, I felt like it could have origins. It sounded like kind of Native American to me, like, you know, connections with the earth. Like I have my master's degree in literature. I took a few Native American literature courses, and we did talk a lot about like connections with the earth, but I've never come across anything about using those words that I use, or like the idea of like earth manipulation or anything like that. I just tried to make it sound like really legit. And I tried to do a little bit of research into some like Native American words and like some aspects of their culture that are, you know, because they are such like an earthy, obviously, people. So no, so that was one of my concerns when I wrote that article. Like those articles, like I wanted them to sound like when you read Carrie and you're reading those, the way he incorporates those articles in there, and you're like, oh my God, is this real? Like, I'm going to Google this person who wrote this because like, this is real.
Excuse me, and I almost did, but I wanted to ask you. I feel so foolish. Like if everybody else
No,
said,
it's not.
I'm just like, you idiots, that's not real.
No,
But I'm just telling you,
absolutely
you
not.
did a great job,
And
and
I'm
you
so
know, there's things
flattered.
out there. You never know.
Yeah, I'm so flattered that it sounded real because that was one of my concerns. Like I wanted it to sound real. So I tried to kind of grounded a little bit in what I learned, what I was able to research a little bit about like Native American culture and like, you know, what I had learned in some of my literature courses and my master's work. But not that I've read that, you know, I haven't read anything about it that it was real. It was just kind of like, I wanted to kind of explain it in a way that was like grounded in reality, in a sense that made us think that like, oh, maybe this is a real thing. Because I know like when I've gone down the rabbit hole with teaching Carrie, and I found all these crazy articles on videos of people who have claimed to have telekinetic powers, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know, maybe you know, like what do we know, you know? So I really appreciate, I'm very flattered that it came off that way, because I was really trying to kind of evoke like a similar like, oh, like this could be real kind of
That
feeling. So I'm
that
glad
kind
that.
of leads into what I was going to ask about. And so obviously, Amber, if you're ignorant, then I would be ignorant too, because my question is very similar. Was there a basis of the birthmark being attached to the ability, if you had read something like that or anything like that?
No, no, that was just something that I purely, um, I don't even know how I thought about that. Thought of that. Like I just, you know, yeah, just like the idea of being like, I liked the symbolism of her being like marked, right? Both like physically and spiritually. That almost like her ability inside was, there was like a physical manifestation about it, which also it made it also tie in with why her mom was so like vehemently intent on getting that removed from her. And in my next story, there's going to be like, I'm thinking about incorporating like marking in all of the stories in a way, just almost like, so like, oh, I read the other story and I knew that in the other story, and oh, that girl has something like that too. Just to kind of like weave it all in together. Like the idea that like what's inside of us is you know, could mark us on the outside as well.
Like heterochromia or something.
Yeah.
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 Well, that kind of leads into a question I had too. We find out about Beverly's stretch marks and how they look like claws on her, but did she have a birthmark that we didn't know about?
That was what I was thinking, that she would have had a marking that we just didn't know about. Maybe that was, and I also kind of thought maybe that could have been why she was so against any display. Like, I don't know, growing up, my mom like had no shame. Like she walked around like totally naked. You know, you go into like the pool. Like I grew up in like Levittown, in a town of like town pools. Like there's always like old ladies like walking around completely naked in the dressing rooms, like no shame. So I thought it was like for me, like that idea of being so private was so unusual because it was just not how I grew up. So I thought that, that would have been an interesting way to explain why Beverly would have been so horrified by the idea of her young daughter seeing her in the act of dressing, because there was something there that was kind of hidden that she never would have talked to her daughter about, because she was not only trying to erase it from her own daughter, but possibly herself as a source of shame. Like one of my early readers really hated that Beverly died. Like they really wanted a final explanation, confrontation between Beverly and Anna. So I like went back and forth with that, because I did include that one chapter where we got a glimpse into Beverly's childhood, that Anna wouldn't have been able to know. It was almost just kind of like an outside chapter that the reader was able to know and understand a little bit more about it. But I tossed the idea around a lot, like, should Beverly not have died? Should they have had it out at the end and it all would have came out? But then I guess that also kind of went with my aversion to tying everything up too nicely.
But I don't know that you even could have done that, because Beverly's death is the catalyst
Right.
for all of this change.
Right.
And Anna was in a holding pattern.
Right.
She was stuck. There's no way that she could have unstuck herself
With
if
her
her
alive.
mom had still been alive.
Yes.
And the reality is that, you may never get that. I never got that with my mom. She passed away. And those of us left behind, we still have to pick up the pieces. And that is worth writing about too.
Yeah.
Rebecca, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up that 1940, 1945 scene with young Beverly, because I would love to ask you about how you approached having not only multiple timelines, but one that was completely non-linear as well. That's usually something that if I'm reading a book and there's multiple timelines or there's non-linear, I get lost really easily, and I never experienced that with your book. It was always very clear where I was, what was happening, at what stage we were at. So I was just wondering what your approach was to both handling these timelines and to the general pacing of the story using them all.
I struggled with that a lot in the beginning, because at first I told the story in a linear fashion, like birth through the end. And some of my early readers felt that there was too much, that it took too long to get the story started, so to speak, that there was too much of the backstory. So I was like, okay, what about doing like a then and now, like interspersing the chapters? So I started playing with that, and I kind of like the effect of that on pacing and the way you can kind of like leave a chapter at almost like an exciting moment and then like go back, and then you're left with like, wait, I want to go back to the other moment, but then at the end of the past you're able like, wait, I want to stay back here. Like I like that when I read. So like, those multiple time points. So I was just trying, I was trying to kind of like make the pacing a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit more compelling. And then there was that wild Beverly chapter, and I didn't know what to do with that really. I toyed with doing it in first person, doing it in third person. Like it was totally like out of left field, but I knew that I felt like I needed to catch a glimpse of her in her childhood. Like what would cause this person to become this way? It had to have been something major. And it gives us, once we see that vision of like Beverly killing her parents, with the fallen tree limb, it's like, okay, why? And I knew I needed to find a way to explain the why, but the character was dead. So I was like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to explain the why? That the character's dead. I thought it would have been too weird to do like a journal. Like it just didn't strike me as something she would do, especially after she saved all those letters. So I was like, why not just give this weird insight that it's funny because like the reader knows it, but Anna doesn't. Like Anna wouldn't have seen that that moment in her mother's past. So I tried to really kind of work it in and say, like, even though, and that was weird, like, I don't even know what that's called. Like, is it like the meta, you know, when you talk about like the meta aspect of books, when Anna then, after that chapter, in the narration, I said, Anna could never have known what her mother's childhood was like. It's like the author saying what the character doesn't know, but the reader knows it. I don't know. There was like, whatever that is. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But ultimately, like, I liked it. And I felt like it gave us, maybe a smidge of sympathy for Beverly, even though she, you know, she was pretty awful cover to cover, but at least it gave a little bit of an explanation about maybe why she was the way she was. And, you know, the hint that there were many, many, many other scenes just like this.
That's one thing that, you know, I actually really liked how you went from the future. I think I even said this in our first interview, is that I liked how you went from, you know, the present to the past, present, because like I do a lot of beta reading and I also read a lot of indie books. And that's actually something that I would say a lot of indie writers struggle with. And I did not feel that you were struggling at all. I felt like I was always able to stay in the correct time. And so I think that's what made it so enjoyable. But yes, that is actually one of the things I have to say when I'm beta reading. I'm like, I didn't realize you were switching here and I got confused, and I never had that at all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because I like worked really hard on the back and forth and the timeline. If it gets loud in here, it's because my kids are about to walk in. So just.
I understand.
So I would love to hear just one last question from each of you, but I do have one more question myself, and then the rest of the hosts can ask. Is there anything you learned from readers' reactions that you would consider for future writing projects?
Is that a question to me?
Yes. Is
Yes.
there anything that you learned from like your readers' reactions that you would consider for like the next few books?
Yes, 100%. I feel like I learned so much from this first book. So to the point where when I was writing my second book, I felt just so more confident in the writing process in terms of the pacing and how I wanted the story to kind of flow. You know, I mentioned before that this one, it just kind of like spilled out, and I didn't really have too much of a plan. And after I kind of had quite a bit of it down, only then was I really able to kind of go back and piece it all together. In my next story, the story that's coming out this summer, I did so much more like storyboarding and drafting, and I really had so much more of an idea of where it was going to go and how it was going to unfold and what my plan was. And kind of where it was going to end. I was able to have like an ending point in mind, because I didn't really have an ending point in mind with this one. So that is something that I definitely just getting an idea of like pacing and flow was something that like this book, like, so like just getting this out of my system, and it was so helped me out with my second one. And that's something that I plan on continuing, just having a little bit more of a plan and maybe thinking it out a little bit more, doing a little bit more storyboarding and all of that. That is definitely something I'm planning to incorporate. I like the way the time shifts went. You know I like that when I'm reading a book, whether it's different characters or different times. So in my next story, I didn't necessarily play with different time periods, but I played with multiple character perspectives. So right, like I said, my next story takes place in Long Beach, and the character has like this connection to the ocean, to the water. It's my water book, and it's going to flip-flop between two main characters and also veer off into some secondary characters. I also recently just started writing my third book, and I think I'm trying to do that in first person, because that's something that's really challenging to me. Both of these are written in third person. So I'm trying to play around with a first person perspective. So just to make things a little bit different and to keep things kind of, I don't know, up in the air a little bit more. So yeah, so a lot of this is, informing how I kind of go about my next process.
Do you want me to go next?
Sure.
Okay. So just a quick yes or no. Beverly is obsessed with cleanliness. Was that because she felt a sense of guilt over what she did to her parents? Just quick.
Because she's felt a sense of guilt over what?
What she did to her family?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. I wanted to just touch on that, but the real question I have is there is something so powerful in this book about Anna touching her roots, about going back, finding out what her family was like, where she's from, all of those things, her uncle. And it seemed to be overwhelmingly healing for her. She was able to get out of her limbo because she was in stasis for years.
Yeah.
It helped her overcome her addiction. She had something important to live for now. From all of this, what do you want your readers to take away from this book when it comes to emotional healing from that kind of trauma?
I want my readers to take away the fact that you are a product of your past, but you're not chained down by it. That you can rise above, and you can learn even later in life to find a voice and to kind of rise above the trauma. Like, the trauma doesn't have to define you. Like, you could live a happy and productive life in spite of a pretty harsh. Like, people are resilient.
So I don't know if anyone else wants to know this. You seem really intimate with trauma. Is it something that you lived yourself and you injected into the book?
No, honestly. And actually, that was when my mom read this, she was like horrified. She was like, "Oh my God, is that how you view me?" She's like this Jewish mom from Long Island. Is that what you think of me? I'm like, no, because she was so not like that growing up. I mean, I think we all have a certain amount of times our parents screwed us up. You know what I mean? Like, even like the best parent, like, but no, I did not live with the trauma, anything close to the type of trauma that Anna experiences growing up.
That makes all of this even more extraordinary because you describe it so completely accurately. You really do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I do have experiences with friends, with students, even just from like the educational perspective, like seeing trauma and like what that could do, and putting myself into like the other people's shoes, and I've always been good at being able to kind of like feel other people's emotions in a way. But thank you. I really appreciate that. I really wanted that to be accurate.
I'll go next.
Okay.
One quick question and then the real question. Is your next book about Mia?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So right, that epilogue. So she's my next story. Yes.
Got it. Okay. I hope that was okay for me to ask.
Yes, of course. I'm
out, Angie.
Yeah.
So cliche question, but I'm very serious because I thought a lot about it. What was the other title you were thinking about going with? Or was this always the title?
So interesting. So the title, I'm terrible at titles. And actually, when this is re-released, I think that it's probably going to be different, because the publisher wants, just the publisher, because like, I'm not super attached to the title.
Okay.
My initial idea, like, one of my inspirations for this, like, I love like some of those old Victorian novels, like Jane Eyre.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like, oh, this could be kind of like a modern story with a woman's name in it, because she's kind of like the focus. So I didn't necessarily have another title, but for my next story, I was going to do something similar with the Mia Rossi in the title. But talking with this publisher, she kind of has this vision for all the books to kind of have a similar title. When you read a series and all the titles are like kind of the same and all the book covers look like kind of the same. So my next book is going to be called Sea of Whispers. And I think that when she re-releases this, it's going to be Echoes of Earth.
I like that.
Possibly. And then it would be Spark of Flame and something for Air. I'm not sure. I haven't but they'll be more like based on the elements, as opposed like element focused, because that's kind of like going to be the uniting feature of like all 4 of the stories, as opposed to like character focused, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? What are everybody's thoughts on that while I have you?
I mean, my 2 cents is that what your publisher is suggesting is probably going to serve you better, probably serve the stories in the series better, especially even in the light, what's the word I'm looking for? The light magical realism genre that you seem to be in. She is absolutely correct that most series have titles like a blank, a blank, a blank, or
Court of Thorn and Roses.
exactly. They
you
all
know.
fit, and I think that absolutely having the focus be more on the elements
Yeah.
in the title will help bring that up so that it can better offset what I said earlier about it being so character centered in the actual narrative. That having a title that brings those other magical elements up a bit more would be helpful.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And like I said, I'm not like the title was always like, maybe it'll be this, maybe it'll be this. I don't know. Like I've always wavered so much with it. So I kind of see where she's going. So like all 4 of the books would kind of sound the same, kind of look the same, and, building up readership,
See,
to make them look all together.
See, as a reader, I don't agree. I love the name. I think it's unusual enough that it makes people go, "Oh, what's that about?"
Yeah.
Because the truth is the really the magical element is secondary in the
Right.
book.
I
Right.
have to agree.
Yeah.
For me, I have to agree that I feel like that was secondary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
and
I
I
didn't
feel
want
like
it to be in your face. I wanted it to be subtle.
right.
Yeah.
And that subtleness, it lends so much ability for us to really fall in love with Anna and who she is as a person, because it's not about her gift. It's about who she is and how her gift plays into who she is and the healing that she comes by. And you could play on the extraordinary thing as well, the brilliant, the amazing,
So that was my first thought, like the miraculous Mia Rossi.
Yeah.
Oh, love it.
Anna Parke. It's still something I'm kind of like tossing around with her.
Mhm.
Like we haven't made any decisions. She kind of had like a little bit of a different vision for the title. Right. Because like the elements as opposed to the characters, which I see it, I understand. It's still something that I'm thinking on, now that we're kind of moving on with like cover design and all that stuff.
Melanie, where
Right.
do you see this book falling? Like, if you could pick, I know that's really hard to pick a genre, because I have to agree with Dawn so much that the magical realism was just the secondary element. And Angie said it earlier that this is women's literature. That's it. So where would you place this?
That's like one of my harder questions, because I don't know really, because it's not fantasy, and I don't consider it fantasy, at least from my worldview of what I think of when I think of fantasy. It's women's literature, but it has that subtle fantasy element. It reminds me more of something like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, or like one of those stories. I don't know if you guys have read that.
That's my next read.
When I read that, I was like, okay, because she's a normal person, but there's more there, because there's like a time travel element there. But I feel like it does kind of fall between two stools in terms of genre, because I don't know. It wouldn't be in fantasy. It wouldn't, maybe kind of mystery, women's fiction. I've been kind of just calling it like contemporary, because that's such like a cop out, because like so much, could be encompassed under that. So I guess I would call it women's fiction or speculative fiction. I think that's like kind of like the buzzy word.
So let's ask the developmental editor in the room. What genre would you put it in?
That's not my job, essentially. If I had been developmentally editing this, I would have done basically what she just did and been like, well, because of this element, it could fit here, and because of those elements, it could fit here. And this actually leads very nicely into what my last question was going to be. Dawn Marie already asked about theme, and Amber just asked the first part of what my last question was going to be, which was about genre. So one of the elements that I will always use in helping an author figure out what genre they are in is with this question. And once you've answered it, maybe I'll have more thoughts. What do you think is the single biggest emotion that you want to deliver through the story, especially in the climax and resolution?
Probably hope.
Okay.
An
Yeah.
to inspiration to rise above your previous station.
I think that you have succeeded in that. I think that comes through. And I agree with your assessment that you were talking about a minute ago. And that's obviously not a romance, payoff. That's not really an action adventure payoff. That's not, a thriller payoff. That is a women's lit or contemporary or one of those others. I think that because that is your core emotion, I think you've made the right calls in what you are defining your genres and your categories as.
Thank you.
I will say too that as I was reading this book, I was telling my husband about it, and I'd read a little more, and he'd be like, "Okay, what happened?" So I don't. So I think men are going to enjoy this book too. I really do, because it's just so powerful and it's just so moving.
Thank you.
But I love that it's not like, oh, and she gets the guy and everybody lives happily ever after.
Love that
Where,
there was no love interest.
I love that. It was great. And it didn't make you, and you were still on the edge of your seat, not wanting to put it down, reading voraciously for days. Like that is, I loved it. It was great.
And it's not like I was ever waiting to find the love interest either. There was never any expectation or like false starts on it. It never occurred. So I think you nailed that aspect of your genre as well.
She didn't need one, you know?
She didn't.
My next book isn't really much about a love interest either. That's just not what motivates me as, I mean, of course it's nice, but that's just not what I tend to think so much about.
We have these beautiful, vibrant inner lives that have nothing to do with men. And I think that, and even though, Angie and I are married, and Amber, I think you're married too. Rebecca, you're still single, right?
I have a boyfriend.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't dislike men. But
Yeah.
we have these beautiful, women have these rich, full inner lives. And I feel like there's a hole in the literature community as a whole, where there's so much about romance and so much about even stories that aren't primarily about romance always have their little romance in them.
Yeah.
And it tends to be super popular. But this book is just so rich and so full of Anna's inner dialogue and her inner healing that you don't even miss the romance aspect.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
Thank you. I didn't want it to be some guy that swoops in and makes her feel whole again. She could do that on her own,
Mm-hmm. And the truth is that nobody can make her feel whole again except for her.
It had to come from within. Yeah.
Exactly.
Are there any other closing thoughts or anything you wanted to say to Melanie before we go?
This was wonderful. Thank you all so much for your your comments, your insight. I'm so humbled to be among your company, and I'm going to go to bed with the biggest smile on my face, because this was just such an amazing experience. And I'm just so like, thank you for having me and for talking to me about, like, this is crazy that, it's amazing. Thank you.
Definitely.
Just thank you.
We were looking forward to meeting you because this is just so beautifully written. And please keep writing more books.
Thank you. Well, my next one should come out this summer. So maybe you'd have me back.
Definitely.
I would be open to that.
Shoot me an email.
Yes, definitely. I will. Thank you. I mean, I am like so over the moon with just being able to talk to you beautiful ladies. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to Melanie for being on here. Thank you to my hosts. I appreciate all the great questions that you guys asked. And yes, definitely keep in touch. I want to know what the next book is, and maybe we can have you on the podcast, and maybe next year we'll do another one with you. Maybe
I would love that. Thank you so much. And you guys, you're doing a great job, all of you, with this. This is amazing.
Again, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
But coming from somebody who faced that same kind of trauma, like that smile that she describes on Beverly, I got that all the time. So for me, I was incredibly invested in the book because I lived it, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't boring. I was like, let's get some healing. This was exciting to me, but I can understand how somebody who hasn't gone through that would feel differently about it, you
Yeah.
know? So, but I mean, her descriptors were great. She is a good writer. What do you think,
I
Rebecca?
definitely noticed that like her choices in what to describe, like the texture of the couch really caught my attention. And there were lots of other moments like that. I'm like, oh, that's some very immersive little detail to include.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I did like this book because I don't really read any type of fantasy, magical realism, and if anything, I wanted to know more. When I was reading the articles that she wrote in the book, I really wanted the backstory more. And I have a confession to make. And I feel like this would have been really cool.
You did Google it, didn't you?
No.
Oh, no. Okay, go
This
ahead.
is brand new. I'm bringing up a brand new confession. When I
Okay.
read the epilogue, I accidentally, because if you guys saw me flipping through my book, I was like, I better make sure that I really know what I'm about to say. When I read the epilogue, for some reason, I thought it was the girl that committed suicide in the article.
Oh.
That's how
Oh.
because I read it on my Kindle. I couldn't go back. I mean, I could, but it would take me forever. And so I was like, oh, she's not really dead. The parents just wanted to be done with it. Oh my gosh. And now I realize that's 100% not what happened.
That would have been cooler though.
That would have been cool, right? I was like, woo.
Yeah, it would have. But we have
sad.
that whole day where Beverly was gone the entire day and she heated up spaghetti for herself. And then Beverly comes out of the woods barefoot with pine needles in her hair, right? What was she doing?
I think that was just a foreshadow that she too had the gift.
I see.
It served
I
that
think
purpose,
she
but
was burning that tree stump. That's what I think she was doing
Oh.
because the tree stump was black when Anna
That's what I
found it.
thought. I think I made that assumption.
I think that she realized Anna had the gift and she didn't want the tree to tell her what she had done, so she tried to kill it. And then when the tree passed the knowledge on to Anna, it turned slimy and kind of withered.
I think
And
I just made that assumption. I don't know why
Yeah.
I
And
thought
I
that.
think that the tree held on just long enough to tell Anna what had happened, and then it was gone.
check me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that when she sees the vision of the branch dropping on her, the tree turns black in that moment. So the tree has been
Oh.
black since Beverly killed her parents.
I had assumed that also. I don't remember reading that part, but that's what I had assumed too.
I think it was
I don't know.
described in that scene as like the
Like
branch dropped
symbolism
and
of
then the
evil,
tree
but it's
turned
not
black
black.
as like remorse and shame and yeah.
The tree
Okay,
felt-
yeah. I think there was something about the tree being shame. Yeah.
I know the tree felt betrayed.
Mm.
She uses the word betrayal, that Beverly betrayed the tree.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I just, that is one I would have liked to have tied up. That is the one thing I would have liked to have tied up. But
I'm always careful as an editor because like I'm also a writer.
well, truthfully, it makes sense that she's a Stephen King lover because he sometimes does that too,
Yeah.
where he doesn't tie everything in a nice little bow either.
But that makes sense in his genre.
Well,
Right.
yes, it does. But I'm just saying you can tell that you can see that influence.
Absolutely. Like the moment she mentioned that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of things make sense.
Oh yeah, I did the same thing. I mean, Carrie's a brilliant book. Like I remember reading it and going, and hearing the book is saying, in this Reader's Digest article, and I'm going, did this really happen? And this was before Google because I'm old. I predate the internet. So I couldn't have even looked anything like that up, but I was like, wait a minute.
So
something like
I
this
highly
actually
suggest
happened.
listening to it because he even does a foreword and you learn like this was the first one he ever sold.
And it's interesting that we're sitting here talking about Stephen King, but I mean, he's a master. He did Shawshank Redemption. And he did Green Mile, which is delicious. It's delicious. Yeah, so many things that on one hand are very horrifying and on the other hand are completely heartfelt. So yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you for joining us on this magical journey through Authors Alcove, the reading nook. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, this episode is brought to you by knowadays.com, a company that offers many courses from how to become a freelance writer to proofreading and editing. I have personally taken some of these courses, and I am very happy with what I learned. If you would like to support me on Patreon, you can find the affiliate link in the show notes. I would love for you to join me on my other 2 podcasts as well, Authors Alcove, The Writing Corner, where we talk about everything writing, publishing, and marketing, as well as Authors Alcove, The Healing Corner, where authors share their books on healing and recovery. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next chapter.